Each and every night, each and every day, for freedom I'ma fight, in each and every way. Each and every night, each and every day, for freedom I'ma fight, in each and every way. Each and every night, each and every day, for freedom I'ma fight, in each and every way. Each and every night, each and every day, for freedom I'ma fight, in each and every way. They killed Martin, he was leading with love. Knocked the Black Panthers off the map, you know they couldn't see us with guns. Free him, and a pool full of blood. So many assassinations in the nation, we on the run, but I won't run no more. Stay and fight in the war. Organize my troops to shoot the truth right through the court. Keep the door when you lock me out. They see it's hard to score, they trying to stop me now, but they want me around. Ain't no justice from the outside, that's only within. If more of our people see it that way, then we gon' win. I mean, we've already won, but feeling the victimhood, disconnected, miseducated, and so misunderstood. Wish I could hear the word if I had one wish. It's piss boy, and finding out Jimmy's didn't exist. I beats with a fist in the air, like my sister with an afro hairstyle, and all black holding it down. Many families broken down from the systematic strategy. Diplomatic leaders colonizing nationalities. Evil tactics they practice attacking our humanity. History repeating itself, and I see insanity. On the journey seeking for wealth, and they wanna manage me. Take advantage of my talents, but not have me eat. Being in the grave before being a slave. Something in my DNA, we gon' keep breaking them chains, because each and every night, each and every day, for freedom I'ma fight, and each and every way, each and every night, each and every day, for freedom I'ma fight, and each and every way. Yeah. What's good? Oh, it's been a day. It's been a day. Appreciate y'all joining. It's Dark Side of Education. Dropped my phone, my bad. It's your boy Rashad Turner. It has been a day. It's been a spring, a summer, but it's been a day, right? But we're here. My technology messed up Sunday. I think that might have been a sign, though, right? Because we had some other work to do. And now we done did that work. The work continues. And we're here. Excuse me. See, I don't even know what day it is. Tuesday night, 7 o'clock show. I guess we could say we prime time tonight, y'all. And I just got some juicy text messages. So a lot to cover tonight. Shout out to Louis Blaze. You know I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Louis Blaze. You're doing your thing. No questions. Will you come on next week's show? Will you come on the show this weekend, Louis Blaze, and do that intro live? A lot of people feeling that track. I know it gets me fired up. So let me know, Louis Blaze. N4, holding it down. Appreciate y'all. So again, it's the Dark Side of Education. I'm your host, Rashad Turner. If you've been paying attention to what's going on here in Minnesota, specifically in Minneapolis, we called for a boycott today. Minnesota Parent Union, NAACP, my sister, Queen Nakima Levy-Armstrong, out there supporting. Bunch of people out there supporting the boycott of Minneapolis public schools. Been talking a lot today. But a lot of folks out there supporting the boycott. Families have been asking questions, right? Questions around what type of support are we going to receive from Minneapolis public schools? And these questions, I had Cooley on the show last week or a couple weeks ago. She talked about the need for internet, support with internet, right? Family advocates are out in the community every day, working right alongside families, even though it's COVID. We're putting the masks on, we're putting the gloves on, and out there doing what we got to do. So they've been hearing from families. We've been hearing from families that there is a lot of support that is needed for families who are attending Minneapolis public schools. They know it's going to be distance learning. That's been announced. They're hearing these other things in the news around money that came into Minneapolis public schools. And back in March, it was easy to tell families, hey, it's early. We got to see what these folks are going to do. Give them some time. Oh, but they've been failing us, so why are we going to give them time? Well, this guidance just came down from the governor. The Department of Education said this. Let's see what they say, right? There's no way they're going to leave us hanging in the midst of this pandemic. There's no way. So they asked the questions. We didn't really have answers for them, but we did our best to try to get them the information they needed. We did listening sessions, presentations. We partnered with our good partners at Allies. Michelle did a presentation, walked through the guidance and what that stuff meant. But there were still questions. How are we going to help our kids with distance learning when we have to work? How are we going to do our own work and make sure that they're getting their work done? But back up a second, Rashad. Not even that they're getting their work done, but that they can log in appropriately so they're counted. And so we don't have child protection knocking at our door talking about we've missed too many days of school. So you get these questions and, we're going to go right to the source. So we try to look for some support out in the community. We took some time to partner with some teachers and get this reading initiative going. Literacy is power. You've heard me talk about that before. But even with that initiative, we know that's not enough. And we know that at Minnesota Parent Union, we aren't a school. Not yet. We aren't a school. We have some teachers on our squad, but that's not our role. So we did what we could with the reading initiative and came across this North Star Network initiative. Basically, pods all around Minneapolis, serving the most, low wealth, or I like this one even better now, redlined communities, right? So pods all throughout the redlined communities, making sure families have the supplemental support that they need. We come across that initiative. There was an op-ed in the Star Tribune, one of our local papers here, if you're watching from out of town. But in the Star Tribune, there was an op-ed. Charlie Weaver, Archie Black, Lewis King. They talked about this North Star Network. They talked about the pilot that had been done. And even before this op-ed came out, we were researching, how effective this thing could be. And based on the pilot and the students they served throughout the summer and late spring, it looked pretty good. It was a solution, fully baked up solution to not take care of the whole problem, not erase the school experience, but to provide some support for families. And I was just thinking of something, right? Families who our superintendent, Ed Graff, and in particular, he was talking about Black families, Black kids, we call them marginalized. And I'll get to that call later. But to provide this support to families who need it the most, families who've been marginalized by people like Ed Graff, families who've been pushed to the margins, ignored, phone calls not answered, voicemails not returned. Right? Provide that support. We knew we couldn't do it all with the reading initiative. Well, here's this North Star Network. We basically had to call everybody and their mama to try to get a meeting with Graff. And I'm going to say this one time. Ed Graff, superintendent of Minneapolis Public Schools. But I'm done with him, so I'm just going to call him Ed.
So when you hear me say Mr. Ed or Ed, that's who I'm talking about. But we take months to get a meeting. I'll say 2 months to be nice. 2 months to get this meeting. We finally get this call. Graf pulls together. It seemed like the entire district leadership team, only for them to introduce themselves, really. Nobody said anything besides Finance Director Jop and Ed. But he pulls this whole squad together, gets on this call, acts like he has no clue what the North Star Network is. Let's start there. Acts like he has absolutely no clue. But I know Ed Graf received the presentation. I know that folks where Ed Graf lives, in his $1 million home, folks in his neighborhood, including him, are reading the newspaper. So I know he had the presentation before the meeting, long before the meeting. I know he had access to the Star Tribune, and I know he's reading it. Because he knows he ain't doing nothing. There's a good chance there might be a story about him in there. I know he's reading it. So he starts this meeting. He says, well, what's this, thing you're talking about? What's this thing you're talking about? So I say, well, before we even get to that thing we're talking about, Ed, and at that time, I think I called him Superintendent Graf still. But I said, before we even get to that, let's talk about your failure to plan. Right? You had 3 options. You're going to do distance learning, you're going to do in-person, or you're going to do hybrid. We all knew that months ago, right? That was the guidance. That's what was laid out. But I told him, it's clear there's been a failure to plan. It's clear based on the stories that we're hearing from families every day, damn near, that there's a failure to communicate because families don't have a clue what's going on. People out in the community don't have a clue what's going on. Everybody's waiting for the leader of MPS, the superintendent, Ed, to present the plan to support families, to make sure that they're not sucked into the sinkhole, right? To make sure of that. And I told him, you have to let us know something. And then we talked about the North Star Network, talked about the 70 pods, right? If you remember me a few weeks ago or about a month ago or so, when it was only the rich people talking about pods, right? Here we have a solution, fully baked, pods, whatever you want to call them, a supplement to their education, support for families, support for our children. And you know what Graf said after he heard the presentation, modified presentation? Because everybody on the call knew that he had the presentation already. But you know what he said? Well, we don't have any money to support families in this way. We don't have the money. And I said, Ed, or someone said, well, what about that $31 million that you got from the CARES Act? Where'd all that money go? So then he calls his, I'm gonna take it easy on Jop, but he calls his finance director, or says, hey, Director Jop, will you talk through what the funding, just can you tell them about that stuff so they're clear? Jop gets on there, basically just regurgitates what Graf said, right? All of the money's gone. This money over here, we can't spend on families. This money over here, we can't spend on this. No. No support for a solution that is fully baked, tested, piloted, and ready to go. So what's the plan, Graf? What's the plan? There was no plan. He didn't say anything. Basically, just without saying it, told us the money went back into this broken machine that we call Minneapolis Public Schools. So no support, no plan. I'd say no wonder why we called for a boycott. What are we supposed to say to families, Ed Graf? I know we don't have all the answers. We don't try to have all the answers. But when we have, like, really no answer, really no plan to share with them on how they're going to be supported, how our children are going to be supported through this distance learning experience. I said this earlier. We can't just look at families, right? Minnesota Parent Union can't just look at our families who we work with, who we support, who we fight with, fight for, and throw our arms up and say, well, you know, we tried. We tried our hardest, and, you know, good luck. Get in our reading initiative. Like, we can't say that. So when we have no answers, right, when we've been backed into a corner as communities, well, you have to start to push some different buttons. Right? And the question in the past here in Minnesota, in Minneapolis in particular, is, well, what about the children? What about the children when you call for a boycott, you call for a strike? What about the children? And I look back at some of these fools and I say, what about the schools where 4 out of 5 kids can't read? What the hell are you talking about? But now I can also say, well, we got families' backs. Yeah, that's right. Minnesota Parent Union's here. We can provide this one-on-one support, just like we always do. Right? We focus on enrollment. That's what we do. So now someone's here that has families' backs, can help them navigate, can push up against the system if they need us to. And here we are, boycotting Minneapolis public schools. A lack of leadership on Graf's part, a failure to plan on Graf's part, a failure to communicate. So how are the children, right? What about the children? Now it's time to make sure that we get our children into quality school options. Okay? That's what's next. There are folks asking me today, well, what do you do next, Rashad? What are you guys going to do next? Well, we're going to do what we always do. And that's support families. That's support our children. Let's make sure we have information that's accurate, that's objective to share with families as they're on their journey to finding quality education. Because it's damn sure not coming. It hasn't been there in Minneapolis public schools. It for sure ain't happening this fall. It's not happening. It's sad. It's frustrating. I mean, hell, if you thought when you tune in on Sundays at 10 a.m., like, damn, that dude's amped for 10 a.m. Well, now it's 7 o'clock, right? And it's been a frustrating week because folks who live in $1 million houses, like Ed Graf, have apparently been on vacation all of this time. I mean, I don't like to talk about all of the work we've done in Minnesota Parent Union, but damn, Graf, we launched an organization a couple months before a pandemic started. And we've been busting our butts to make sure we're supporting families And it appears that Graf's been on vacation, right? When you got $1 million home in Edina, oh, he's a Minneapolis superintendent, but he lives in Edina. Well, for those not from here, it gets a little tricky right around that southwest border. I don't have his exact address. Actually, I do have his exact address. That's how I know he lives in $1 million home with all that he needs, while thousands of children in the district that he's supposed to be the superintendent might never, ever, ever be able to even really dream about having $1 million home. And take out the $1 million home. Think about all of the opportunities that it takes to even get to that point. If your kid's in Minneapolis public schools right now, I'm going to say this. If you keep them in there, we're going to have your back. But if you keep them in there this fall, with this guy as a superintendent, with no plan to support families, your children will never have the opportunities that Ed Graf has had that have allowed him to purchase a $1 million home in Edina. They'll never have those opportunities. Want to know why? Because if you're a Minneapolis public schools family, you know education's been bad. You know they're not teaching our kids. They're not teaching low-income white kids. You know they're damn sure not teaching our kids. Yeah, that's right. So if you're a Minneapolis public schools family, you know that Minneapolis public schools has consistently failed to educate our children. Consistently. Not just like, oh, we're on a couple of years slide in the wrong direction. Decades. But when you have leadership like we do with Ed, who ignores families, ignores school leadership, ignores principals. I mean, hell, who is Ed listening to? Who's he listening to? I mean, for folks in Minnesota, you think back to the comprehensive district design, there was no family input there. Right? Our family advocates had to say, oh, whoa, can we slow down the process? Can you guys take a second to listen to families? Can you provide some interpreters? Like, that's what had to happen in that process of the comprehensive district design for the process to even slow down a little bit. Then they still didn't listen to families. They did a bunch of workshops where 2 or 3 people showed up. 1 or 2 of them was, Kulia or Miss Como or somebody, Mustafa. So they didn't listen to families then. They haven't listened to families throughout this COVID experience. And now, with no plan, they're still not listening to families. Families are saying what they need. And I'm going to say this, right? Other nonprofits in Minnesota, Minneapolis specifically, you've been here for a while. You've been a part of this system in one way or the other. It's time to step up. That's right. And I'm not going to call out any nonprofits in Minneapolis tonight. Or I might, but not right now. But we all have to step up, right? It was great to see the Minneapolis NAACP step up and say, hey, enough's enough. It was great to see some of the pastors and the ministers from the community step up, stand in support with us and say, hey, enough's enough. But it's time for everybody to stand up. If you are a nonprofit in Minnesota, in Minneapolis in this case, it's time to step up. How are you going to let the families you support send their kids to schools where 4 out of 5 kids can't read? How are you going to do it? How do you sleep at night? It was hard to sleep last night after hearing Graf say he didn't have a plan. But how do you sleep at night if you just let families be tricked into keeping their kids in schools where 4 out of 5 kids can't read? Stand up. You're getting this money. You're raising the money. Right? I got to do that now. I know how it goes now. I was a funder. I know how it goes. You're raising it and you're telling your funding partners you're going to do something, whatever that mission is. If keeping families in bad schools where their voices aren't listened to, their calls aren't answered, if that is your agenda, you are in the way. You are in the way of quality education for our children. So think about it. And it's like, we had a good turnout at the press conference today. Folks came out there, they had their masks on. They knew it was going to be risky being a part of this call for a boycott, fighting against the status quo, but they showed up. And we appreciate y'all, everybody that showed up. Fox 9, you came out and took it seriously. You can tune in tonight on Fox 9. They covered the boycott, the call for the boycott. NPR, they covered it. They took it seriously. So we got to make sure that Minneapolis Public Schools takes it seriously. And we all, as a community, as freedom fighters, right? I play that song at the beginning because I feel like if you're tuning in, if you're watching this, you listen to me, you got a little bit of freedom fighter in you. Or that's right. There's some haters that watch too. I know. Thanks for the reminder. Right? But it's like it's a risky call to call for a boycott. We got the families covered. We got our children covered. We got the support. Now we need more folks to stand up. You want to know why? Because I said, I know a lot of freedom fighters tune in. Let me tell you what happens when you go against the status quo. Right? And when I was doing Black Lives Matter stuff, it was more the emails and the messages just calling me a nigger, terrorist, stuff like that, right? And that stuff wasn't pleasant. It came with the territory. This education stuff, it's interesting because it's sort of a different group of people that come at you, right? When you're bold, when you put families first, when you truly put children first, the people come at you. And it's one of the things I let everybody around me know, like, hey, if you're going to get into this fight, leave that scary stuff at home. Because when you start pressing on the right buttons, which we obviously have with this boycott, right? I mean, everyone knows Minneapolis Public Schools sucks, especially for children of color. But when you start pressing the right buttons, they come at you. And it ain't the time to get scared when they come at you. It's the time to do a little more research, maybe. Tie your shoestrings, tighten up your belt, and get ready to keep up the fight. Because what I just received a little bit before the show started, right? I was talking to All-Star MVP Coolia. Then I was talking to my brother, Brandon. Then I was talking to my homie, Jennifer. Then I talked to a couple of teachers. And a couple of teachers said the same thing the folks I mentioned previously said. That was bold. That was the right thing to do. Families are responding already. Seen a message a little bit ago earlier today. Thanks for being bold. We've unenrolled our children from MPS. But with being bold, they also know that you have folks that come and try to attack you. And what I received, I'm going to try to pull this up. Try to pull this up and see if I can't find exactly what I'm looking for. And if you're watching, Greta, we see you. We see you seeing us. We know what's up. And I don't know if y'all can see that all the way. But just take a second and read it. I'm going to bring up Greta's name on the screen. But Greta, we know you're watching. We know you're talking stuff. We know that you're one of those people. And did I say this already? Greta Callahan is the president of the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers. Yeah, Greta. We see you. And I got a question at the press conference earlier. Someone asked me. They said, is the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers supporting this call for a boycott of Minneapolis public schools? And I said, I doubt it. Haven't heard from them, but I doubt it. But here we go with the confirmation. And I can't see this whole post, but it was sent to me. Calls out Ed Graff for calling African-American students marginalized. But you see Greta over there? Greta Callahan, y'all. President of the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers. I'm trying to take it easy. Let me get another sip of water. I'm trying to take it easy. I don't want to go too ham. But I have no choice. Greta leaves me no choice because earlier I mentioned, like, hey, there's people, and I was talking about the nonprofits then, but there's people, there's organizations out there that want our children to stay in schools where 4 out of 5 kids can't read. The teachers' unions, yes. The killers, yeah, those folks. Killers of hopes and dreams. They're one of those organizations. They think that everything's fine right now in Minneapolis public schools. Somebody said, hey, yeah, Minnesota Parent Union, they said something. And here's Greta's response. No, they are trying to take public dollars for private interests. When MPS didn't agree on the spot to hand over public money, this happened. It was a setup. This is disaster capitalism. Well, let me just say this, right? The disaster, Greta, the disaster for Black kids, the disaster for Latina, Native American kids, Somali, East African kids, the disaster started way long time ago, way before COVID. So the disrespect of your comment on a Facebook post, a public post, for you to think that your privilege just means that you can disrespect our call for a boycott. Like, our call for a boycott comes from listening to families. Where do your policies come from, Greta? Huh? Where do your policies that keep our children at the bottom, right? That turn our kids into marginalized, like Ed Graff's called them. Right? Where do your policies fit into what's best for families. She goes on to say, this is from a reform group, a national group with a local unit. Always a nice sounding name. Never actually about students. Well, Greta, I'm never going to say thank you again, but thanks for the compliment on the name. But it's clear you're ignorant. It's clear you don't know what you're talking about. It's clear that you're just spewing out the same bullshit that your masters have been spewing out for years. It's always the same response when it comes to liberating our children's minds. When it comes to demanding a quality education for Black, brown, and indigenous students, it's always the same response from these cowards. It's a reform group, a national group. Well, just for the record, and no disrespect to anybody, but we're not a part of anything national. To be clear, we're not a part of anything national. You want to know why? Because I don't believe, and my board members don't believe, and my family advocates don't believe, our strategic advisory doesn't believe that our issues here in Minnesota are anything to do with some national stuff, right? We got our own issues here. And you know what? What's even better? The solutions, the folks that we need to change this thing are right here in Minnesota. So Greta, you don't know what you're talking about, but since you opened your mouth, or your gangster fingers, I should say, we're going to address some of those things. Disaster capitalism. Well, how do you still have a job, Greta? Right? Don't you work at Bethune? For folks that don't know, I say Bethune might be 4 out of 5 kids can't read, but it's probably more like, you know, how do you get close without being 100% of the kids can't read, right? But Greta works at one of those schools. So if we're talking about a disaster, let's talk about the disaster that is the lack of quality education Minneapolis Public Schools has provided our children. Let's talk about your school, Greta Callahan, Minneapolis Federation of Teachers president. Let's talk about your school, Bethune. Oh, you don't think she works at Bethune? Let me pull this up too. Because I love the people who are out in the community. They're down for the cause. They know what's popping. They're on the inside. They're letting us know what's popping. I love those people. I love them. Because you know what it does? It gives us the information we need to be able to let families know, hey, here's exactly what these people think. Here's exactly what they're doing, right? We call for a boycott. They want to talk about, oh, it's just another reform group. Well, here's the thing. Don't even call us a reform group. We're here to blow this thing up, all right? Not literally, but we're here to blow this thing up. We're here to abolish the current system as we know it. We're not reformers, Greta. There's no need to reform this broken machine, this broken system. Why? Tear it down. Let the families decide what it looks like. Let the families make it better. This ain't no reform move. I don't even know that we have ed reformers in Minnesota. We have folks that are co-conspirators in the fight for quality education. That's what this is about, Greta. We don't like schools like yours. Obviously, Bethune is full of a bunch of teachers who think like you when you look at the data. Now, I don't got time to look at the data, but I got a little time for everybody to look at you. Greta Callahan, president of Minneapolis Federation of Teachers, kindergarten teacher at Bethune Community School. Look that up. If you got your computer right there, look up Bethune. Oh, well, excuse me. You probably ain't going to be able to find the data that easily. We're working on that too, right? But if you find the data on Bethune Community School, you realize that school must be filled with a bunch of Gretas. Maybe we don't call them Karens no more. We call them Gretas, right? Greta Callahan. And oh, I just peeped that. There's the okie doke. Y'all look at the cover photo. Can y'all see that? Looks like a child of color. Greta must be down for our people. She's got black kids in her cover photo. You're not tricking us, Greta. You work at Bethune. You're disrespecting families' rights to choose. You're putting the wool over our eyes talking about reform as if we don't know that right now, I'm truly scared for the families, for the kids going back to Bethune. No lie. Because there's no support. And now we know Greta Callahan works at Bethune. I'm going to make sure we flyer the hell out of that neighborhood. Try to get all of those kids out. Get out. You seen that movie, Greta? I might have seen you in there, or your auntie, or is that your grandma? Or I might have it all wrong. Maybe that was a different movie. Greta Callahan, right? And this lady, they're also going to tell you, oh, well, this is just about destroying public education. I've seen that somewhere. I want to just keep her face up there so we know who we're talking about. And take her name off. Just look at her face. Look at her. Greta Callahan. She's also going to try to tell people, well, this is just about destroying public education. Heard that before, haven't you? I mean, you can look up articles 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Oh, there's this boogeyman out there that wants to destroy public education. Minneapolis public schools suck. They've been destroyed from the inside. When you have schools like Bethune, and obviously Greta, she might be on her last leg in the profession. I don't know. That's usually what they do, is they send the worst, most ineffective, racist teachers to the schools where our babies are in. They don't send them to, those affluent neighborhoods. Greta might have been on her last leg, and they said, oh, let's see here. Which red line community? There we go. All right. Which school? Oh, there's a ton of schools in that red line community that suck. All right. Well, let's put her at Bethune. Greta's going to tell you this is all about, charter schools, private schools. Well, if you haven't had a chance, check out the press release, right? We clearly state we're going to help families get into charter schools in Minneapolis, private schools in Minneapolis, and traditional district schools in the surrounding cities, in the surrounding districts. All right. And I remember when we were putting the press release together, 3 or 4 people, we were all sitting there talking like, well, yeah, these folks are going to come after us. They're going to say what they say. But how can they say what they say when they work in schools that our kids are in and our kids can't read? Greta's scared of charter schools and private schools and other districts because she knows Bethune is garbage. She knows Bethune is full of schools with teachers like her. She knows that Minneapolis public schools, when it comes to Black, brown, and indigenous students, all they have to offer are schools similar to Bethune. You Black, you brown, you indigenous. Yeah, we're going to put you in these bad schools. So it's time to get out. And whether you go to a charter school, whether you go to a private school, and those are popping, you can find the articles. Parents, they ain't waiting on us to call a boycott. They're looking already. Thousands of families in Minnesota have switched over to private schools. Once they learn those private schools have a scholarship, once they figure out that their kid's been placed in a school where 4 out of 5 kids can't read and the building's full of Gretas. Let's not even call them Karens no more, y'all. Let's call them Gretas. Buildings full of Gretas. So parents are already leaving. I said it earlier, we got a message. Thank you. We've unenrolled our children from MPS. Didn't ask them where they went to. Didn't tell them they needed to go to a charter school or they need to go to a private school. That's not what we do. Families have the power. Parents have the power. We know what we want as parents. We know what we want for our children. And we know what our children need. And we know Minneapolis Public Schools isn't providing it. All right. So Greta, hello. I'm glad you're following our work. I'm glad you like our name, Minnesota Parent Union. But I'm going to tell you like this, right? I have a show every week. And anytime you spew any false narratives, I'm going to try to tear y'all apart. And I feel bad a little bit because I know we live in a country where, you know, men ain't really shit. All right, we got so much work to do as men. So I'm gonna leave Greta alone for now. I'll bring on a white woman sometime to tear Greta up, tear these unions up some more. But Greta, I want you to know one last thing. This is about our children. All right. We know what your agendas are as unions. We know you're all about teachers. You know you got a role to play. And finally, here in Minnesota, now parents have a union. And we have a role to play. And our decentralized approach is going to allow us to make sure the system responds to parent voice and to make sure that the teachers' unions, no matter how much money you spend to control the DFL party here in Minnesota, you're not going to keep our children at the bottom. Your false narratives are getting played out. We got the platforms now to respond. We're organized. We have funding partners, all of them local, by the way, Greta. We're going to do what we're here to do, just like you're doing what you're there to do, okay? And I might leave Greta up all night just because, but let me take her down. So that was Greta Callahan, disrespecting families, saying our boycott's all about ruining public schools. And it's just that type of thinking though, y'all. And I'm not done. I know we're at almost 50 minutes. I'm not done. So if you got time tonight, I got time. Okay? We got a lot to talk about. Shit, I might stay here. There's nobody home. It's just me and my puppy, my dog. We got time tonight. So what the union's doing in response to this boycott, what the district is doing in response to the boycott, is just trying to downplay it, right? They're about this, they're about that. It's all about charter schools, all about, you know, destroying public schools. One last note on this before I get over to, you know, the other side of the river, because we got to talk about that teachers union tonight too. So they're telling us that our children only deserve 1 day of learning per week during this distance learning. But the last thing I'm going to say, and this is my Nana calling me. I ain't going to take this call. I love you, Nana. I'm glad you're feeling better. Shout out to my grandma, my Nana, going through some health stuff. They're going to be all right. They fighters. That's how I'm here. You feel me? But the last thing I'm going to say about this, they're going to say this is all about destroying district schools. You might have heard me mention this before, but my bet is that the first low-performing school that we help close by helping families find more quality school options is actually going to be a charter school. It's going to be Cedar Riverside Community School. It's a charter school in Minneapolis. Families have been ignored there. I don't think it's going to open fall 2021. Family Advocate's been organizing the families. They started, last year with 120 students. That was their enrollment. I think they're down to 50 now. Just met a mom today. Our kids are out of there. Thank you, Fatun. Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you, Kulia. Appreciate y'all. Thank you, Ms. Como, for helping families, right? For supporting families, because we know the system has failed, continues to fail, and we can't just sit back, all right? I don't know if I said it like this, but we have the most nonprofits here in Minnesota, I think, in the world. We also have worst in nation education gaps, opportunity gaps, achievement gaps, however you want to look at it. All right, we got to step up. We got to step up. If we don't start stepping up as a nonprofit community, it's going to be get down or lay down time. Have you seen state property? You're on board or you're overboard, right? So that's Minneapolis. That's the boycott. Learn more about that, MinnesotaParentUnion.org, Facebook. Again, you can watch Fox 9 tonight if you're in Minnesota, or check it out online. Shout out to Citizen Ed, Josh Stewart coming out there recording. So you can also catch the press conference on Citizen Ed. Stay tuned to see what's popping with that. But let's go across the river over into St. Paul, where, before I had my technical difficulties on Sunday, we're actually going to talk about how the teachers union in St. Paul is exploiting our children, extorting the district, trying to, for the benefit of their 70,000 teachers, right? And I think I was talking about all. Let's go to St. Paul for a second, where last week or the week before, time's flying, I don't remember the days. Who cares about the days? But last week or the week before, there was an article that said St. Paul Federation of Educators want our kids to go to school, or, to receive learning one day out the week. One day out the week where teachers can choose to do something with our students. Now, I got a bunch of notes on this, but I don't got no show notes with me. I don't got no producers in the studio tonight, so I ain't got my notes. But one day of learning per week. I'm also seeing stuff from them where they want to be able to resign from their jobs or quit their jobs, basically, and keep their benefits, and the district pays for it. Let me say that in a different way. They want to be able to quit their jobs, keep their benefits, receive their benefits covered from the district, which is really, that's our tax dollars, right? Our tax dollars fund schools, along with the other millions of dollars that go into funding schools. But they say one day of learning per week. They want to be able to quit, keep their benefits, district pay for them. They come back whenever they want to. What in the hell are they talking about? I mean, what are they talking about? One day of learning per week? I mean, I just said a few minutes ago, we have worst in nation education gaps. We got to get some get back. We got to catch up. Kids are making, AYP, right? They're not making adequate years of progress, right? The growth isn't there. So one day of learning per week, and I don't know that I've heard of much support that families are getting in St. Paul. I do think that St. Paul Public Schools is finally in talks with Comcast about paying for the internet for families. But one day a week of learning no additional support, and the St. Paul Federation of Educators, Teachers Union, is okay with that. Are you okay with it? I mean, that's the question, right? Are parents in St. Paul okay with our children receiving 1 day of learning per week? Because I'll tell you, that ain't what's popping in the suburbs. All right? That's not happening in the suburbs. Now, I don't live in the suburbs, but, my daughter, she's got 2 separate houses. At her mama's house, they out there in the burbs. But out there, they're doing hybrid. 2 days out the week, she's going to be in school. The other day, she'd be at home. She's got time to check in with her teachers, scheduled time. The teachers have to be available for questions. Teachers have to make sure they're supporting families with more than just an email. But that's not happening in the hood. Urban school districts, redlined communities, that's not happening. Right? So we know our kids aren't getting the education we deserve. We're not getting that quality education. We haven't been getting that quality education. And these fools, St. Paul Federation of Educators, Teachers Union, they're saying our kids deserve 1 day of learning per week. Right? So are they exploiting our children across this, what some would say, great state of Minnesota? Right? 1 million children for the benefit of 70,000 teachers and their precious system. Can y'all hear this loud ass chair? I got to get a new chair. Hey, citizen, I need a new chair. Justice for the cities. I need a new chair. But no, we have to slow these teachers unions down, y'all. There's no question. Do our kids deserve more than 1 day of learning per week? It's obvious that they deserve that. Even though, here, I'll give them this, right? I'll give them this, y'all. They're probably saying like, well, we should only do 1 day of learning per week during this distance learning, because that's all we were really giving them in-person learning anyways, was about 1 day's worth of learning per week, right? So it makes sense to them. They're giving our kids 1 day of learning total per week during, normal school conditions, in-person learning. So they're calling for 1 day of learning per week in St. Paul Public Schools. All right? And that's the question. Is 1 day of school per week enough for our children? Obviously not. But I think also the teachers union could be thinking about certain children, because for certain children, 1 day a week might be enough. Right? For certain children, 1 day a week might be enough. Because we talked about those families before that can move the tutor in or go get the Sylvan Learning Centers and those type of programs, get the tutors. So for certain kids, 1 day might be enough. Is it enough for your kid? Not enough for mine. All right. Our daughter needs 5 days. And we're only about to get 2 days with this hybrid. So we'll see how things go. But 1 day of learning is not enough for redlined communities, for children who have been ignored, for children who are seen as a threat to where they're getting kicked out of class in preschool, right? 1 day of learning is not enough for our community. So for the teachers union in St. Paul to come out with this proposal, I'm telling you right now, Gothard, St. Paul Public School Board, this is where you keep your back straight. We know y'all is used to getting bullied by the union. We know half of y'all is bought and paid for by the union. But this is your opportunity to keep your back straight. Keep your back straight and make sure that the teachers' unions don't destroy our communities any more than what they've already done. I mean, you would think that some of this stuff was a joke. You would think it was satire, but it's real. This is what we're going through in Minnesota. This is what our children are going through. This is what our families are going through. Who's going to slow these people down? The Gretas of the world. Who's going to slow them down when you know they don't care about our kids? It's obvious. And that's why I said we all got to step up. We all got to stand up, as Cooley likes to say. That's what time it is. Right? I usually go through my opening for my show. I usually got my notes out. No. We didn't need to do that today. Because you get so, if you truly care about our children, you're probably pissed off every day when you think about education in Minnesota. If you're watching from somewhere else, probably pissed off every day. Right, Christina Laster? Right? So it's like when you're truly in this fight, you're truly a freedom fighter, we got to step up. We got to push St. Paul Public Schools, the district leadership, just how we're pushing Minneapolis Public Schools. We got to push the school boards to do the right thing. Yeah, I know they haven't. I know the data. But if we're not pushing them, we got this flyer, right? There's this sinkhole, right? If we're not pushing them, our children, our communities are going to be sucked into the sinkhole. And that sinkhole's out there. Because I haven't talked to one person who said that distance learning this past spring was good, was a good experience. I asked the question earlier at the press conference, 30, 40 people out there, not one single hand went up. So it's obvious that we have to step up. It's obvious that now's the time for folks who say they really care about our children, going back to that St. Paul Public School Board, folks who really say they care about our children. Well, let's see. Because let's see, right? Because I'll tell you, no longer than 20 minutes after we put that call for the boycott out, Minneapolis Public Schools, here was a dozen or more parents in St. Paul saying, oh, y'all need to do that over here. So parents are waking up. Communities are waking up. If we stay asleep, if we continue to follow the teachers union as if they care about our children, they're responsible for the disaster. They're controlling education in Minnesota. So if our kids are at the bottom, our kids aren't receiving quality education, you have to get right to one of the blockers, and that's the union. But it can't just be parents on our own fighting against all of these systems. I need some more water. Who I'm talking to. Ain't no water coming. Parents can't do it alone. We cannot fight this fight alone. And today I realized something at the press conference. We're not fighting it alone. That's why it's like through all of this frustration. I can be in tomorrow before it gets there. I can see that day that our children have quality education. Can you see it? Because if you can't, you ain't thinking about our children. All right. If you can't see that, you're a Greta who want to keep the status quo intact so everything's all good for their lives. Right? If you can't see that our children aren't getting quality education, you ain't paying attention. Or you want things to stay the same. I mean, does Graf really not want to have $1 million house? Well, of course he wants that. So how does he keep his job? Keeps the union happy. How do school board members stay on the board for so damn long while the disparities continue to grow? Teachers unions. I got one of my boys who's running for state rep here in Minnesota. I mess with him. I mean, we ain't best friends. We don't kick it every day or whatever, but I'm down with him. But when he took the teachers union's endorsement, I told him, I said, this could get ugly, brother. I said, it could get ugly because I know how teachers unions operate. All right, let me put this photo of Greta back up just as a reminder of how teachers unions operate. You see this child of color, right? I'm assuming, I know they ain't white, so I feel comfortable saying it's a child of color. Right? How teachers unions operate, they try to put the wool over our eyes. They try to put black kids in their cover photos. That's what they do. They get to the elected officials, school board, representatives, senators, and they put the cables on them. And I know they put the cables on my brother. That's why he took the endorsement. But I told him it could get ugly. Because the first time that he supports the Greta's agenda, the teachers union's agenda, it's not going to be pretty. All right, the first time that he gets in the way of quality education, it's not going to be pretty. And he knows how the DFL party and the teachers unions just treated him after his performance at the rally in Hugo. He knows how the party treated him after that. They said, look here, Negro, we told you to be quiet. And I'm just making this up, all right? But they told him, we told you to be quiet. That's why we ain't heard a peep out of him since before the primary election. He won his primary election, goes out to a rally in Hugo, speaks his mind, speaks that truth to power, uses a little foul language. We all do. But then he realized, well, damn, the DFL party, the teachers unions, all of these folks that have endorsed him, shut him up again. And that's what they do here in Minnesota. I'll speak specifically to Minnesota. That's what happens. They get a hold of some of our most down, and they put the cables on them. And who suffers? Our children. Who suffers? Our communities. Who doesn't suffer? The elected officials, the superintendents, the teachers unions. But here we are in this moment where quality education is a must, y'all. Failure's not an option. Are kids going to school in St. Paul one day out of the week, one day of learning? That's not an option. So again, St. Paul Public Schools, board of directors, superintendent, you got to make sure you don't put the needs of teachers in front of the needs of our children, in front of the needs of families. You want to know why? Because in my neighborhood, I see the effects of 4 out of 5 kids in the school building not being able to read. When they look at my Black Lives Matter shirt and Black Lives, what? Black Lives Matter? Well, I can't be mad at the little homie because the school didn't teach him how to read. And that's what we're dealing with. If everything's fine for your family, great. Be an ally if you want to. But right now, too many of us are comfortable with the teachers' unions running everything about education in Minnesota. We're comfortable with leaders like Ed out in Minneapolis not having any plans to support families, to support our children. That's what we're comfortable with here in Minnesota, y'all. Right? I can start the next show off with that. Welcome to education in Minnesota. Or when it comes to education, I won't get to education Minnesota. You feel me? The unions run education here. We have to slow them down, or we see things like what's happening in Minneapolis public schools. No plan, no nothing. No support for families. And you best believe that the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers is behind the scenes trying to do everything they can to keep the status quo intact. I can promise you this. If your kid last school year was in a school where 4 out of 5 kids can't read, they're not going to learn how to read this school year. It ain't happening. Their handwriting is going to be, in my handwriting, sloppy, so I guess, but they're not going to learn. It's not happening. If your school sucked before COVID, it's going to suck even more after. And there's folks out there, the Gretas of the world, that are okay with it. Are you okay with it? That's the question you got to ask yourself. If you're watching this, you're the president of MFT, you're an elected official. Are you okay with the current state of our state? You hear the governors do the state of the state. Well, I don't hear them talk about this. This is what we need a state of the state on, Governor Walz. It is the sinkhole that's out there sucking our children right in it, right into it. Bring out that state of the state. What are you going to do for Black families? What you going to do for brown and indigenous families? Where's the plan? Nobody's got a plan? That's what it's like in Minnesota, y'all. It's unbelievable, but that's what is popping. I haven't ate all day. I might have had a little tomato or something. My garden's been popping this year. Had a tomato. But I haven't ate. But it's just like there's so much popping in Minnesota. And I'm just going to tell you, me talking about these things, or y'all watching this, whether you're watching it live or you're tuning in later, it ain't enough. This is about creating that awareness. It's about, getting that message out there. Right? Our work at Minnesota Parent Union, a big part of that is making sure families have the microphone in their hand, making sure their voices are being heard. Another part of that is being the megaphone. But in addition to that, there needs to be action. There needs to be action. We have to be able to expect quality education, or we have to take our kids' money and go find somewhere else. Go find quality, right? If schools aren't quality, get the heck out. Get the heck out. What you waiting for? We got to get the information out there. We got to create the awareness, but it's about taking action. We have to be informed consumers. We have to know how this education system really works. We have to follow the money. I mentioned earlier, Minneapolis public schools, they got $31 million in CARES funding. Nothing to support families. Families in Minneapolis don't have internet. Well, what's the district doing? Nothing to support families. Sounds like the same things happening in St. Paul. Sounds like the same things happening down in Red Wing, Minnesota. Sound like the same things happening in Osseo, St. Cloud, Duluth. Are you in those cities? Because we're going to be starting up chapters real soon. Because it's about action. And it's not about Minnesota Parent Union doing everything. Think about Black Lives Matter for a minute and that decentralized approach. We can say, well, quality education is a must. Well, yeah. But we can't tell parents what to do. We can't tell parents down in Red Wing, hey, here's what you do, here's how you do it. No. We got to listen. We got to help folks get informed. Then we got to take action. We, all of us. If you don't like what's happening right now in education, it's time to take action. You might feel like you're late to the party. I get your messages. I don't always reply. Sorry. But you might feel like you're late to the party. Don't worry about that. Our children need you to do something right here, right now. Our children. There's no such thing as other people's children. If we don't stand up, it's going to be a wrap. And if you think I'm just being alarmist, well, look at the data before COVID. And if you want to debate me, and your point is that, like, well, the data was criminal before COVID, but it's going to be better all of a sudden. If you want to debate me, sure, come on, do it. I'll debate anybody who thinks that education right now in Minnesota, or education for the last decade or 2 decades in Minnesota has been good. But again, we can talk, we can share information, but we have to act. We have to act, right? If we're not taking action, what are we doing? We should start seeing parent strikes all around the country, really. But damn sure all around this state where families don't feel like they have the support they need. Well, how can you do that, Rashad? Where are they going to go? There's not, well, if there's no other options in your community, it's all this, it's all one size fits all approach in your community. Well, you can start a charter school. You can homeschool your children. Whatever you choose to do. Because remember, this is about self-determination. It's time to rise up, y'all. Captain's not coming to save us. You get it. So what are we going to do? Next week, school is going to start. Our daughter, she's going to start school next Thursday, basically. That's her first day of hybrid, in person, as part of their hybrid. And I know that regardless of my childhood, the trauma, the drama, not having a father, my mother struggling, I know that our daughter's going to be all right. She's going to have what she needs. But I'm not going to stop there. Why should my daughter be, one of the few kids, black kids, to get a great education? Everyone needs their own experience. One size doesn't fit all. But I want all of our children here in this state of Minnesota to get the same quality education my daughter gets. Now, I'll try to say our daughter because I didn't give birth to her. I couldn't handle that. But I want children to have the same quality education that our daughter is afforded at her school. Before I get up out of here, y'all, a few reminders. Starting to get a little hangry. I got a grub though, for real. I appreciate y'all tuning in this long. I could go and just keep going because that's how bad it is here in Minnesota. And that's how bad it is in Minneapolis public schools. What do we say to families? Oh, no support's coming. But we're a nonprofit. We have funding partners. We ain't getting all the money, but we got funding partners, but we don't have any solutions for you. No, Minnesota Parent Union's not that type of nonprofit. All right. I mean, really, nonprofit is like some tax stuff and you can't endorse candidates. That's all that means. But we're not caught up in that nonprofit industrial complex that's going to make us sit back and be okay with being a mediocre organization, with having mediocre plans. Failure is not an option. All right. When I say failure is not an option, I'm talking to all of us. I know our team of family advocates, folks helping with operations, strategic advisory council, board, they're busting their butts because it's 10 toes down for quality education. It's 10 toes down for our communities. People might try to make education like a black student versus white student, but hey, communities of color, our experiences are intertwined. I guarantee you might be better off if you ain't black inside of a school, right? Because we know the target's on black kids in school, Native American kids, Latinx kids. But I lost my train of thought there. Getting tired, told you. Ran out of water. If you remember where I was going right there, just let me know. I think it was about being a mediocre nonprofit because we have a lot of mediocre nonprofits in Minneapolis. A lot of mediocre nonprofits in Minneapolis who allow Minneapolis public schools to harvest the minds of our children. Minnesota Parent Union won't be that. We won't be that because we're listening to families. We're a family-powered education alliance. We're down for the cause, 10 toes down, everybody. So we won't be that mediocre nonprofit that's going to back down from the fight. And if you're that mediocre nonprofit and you're listening, well, step your game up before you get ran over. Right? Because our children not receiving quality education has never been okay. But maybe nobody's been bold enough to tell you that if you're not helping our families, helping our children, ensuring that they have a quality education. If you're okay with what Graph is doing, and you're a nonprofit in Minneapolis, it's time to just, reevaluate. All right, I ain't gonna chop your legs off, not yet, but reevaluate. Think about how much we value our children, and think about how clear it is that these schools, districts, systems don't value our children. Now I'm gonna get to my few reminders, and I'm gonna get the heck up out of here. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Never even said what the show was again, but it's Dark Side of Education. I'm your host, Rashad Turner. A few reminders before we get out of here. Quality is a must. I gotta get a new chair. That ain't the reminders. Quality is a must. Failure is not an option. Zip codes should not determine quality of education our children receive. When parents choose, our children have a chance. Families of color are going to change the game. Right? Let me say that again. Families of color are going to change the game. Families of color are going to abolish this current trash system that's held intact by folks like Greta Callahan, president of Minneapolis Federation of Teachers. Only way it's going to change is if we do it, y'all. I promise you. We are not waiting for anybody to come and save us. We are not waiting for kumbaya. You are either with families or against families. And for your sake, I hope you're with families. Because the days of folks sitting in them towers, making decisions without families, only listening to the union, those days are over. Those days are over. If you're trying to get it cracking with us, it's going across the bottom of the screen. Text MNPU to 3339 and join the movement. Squad up. You can get at us on Twitter, Facebook. We're going to get an Instagram going soon. But squad up. If you're in a city in the state of Minnesota and you want to start a chapter because you know time's up for not having quality education, well, let us know. We'll follow your lead. We see you. We know what's cracking. We know education's bad. And we also know it's our responsibility, because we're a nonprofit and we're receiving funds from our funding partners. It's our responsibility to get the job done. This is about self-determination. It's time to free the minds of our children. Is that what you're about? Or are you about keeping the status quo intact? Which one is it? It can't be both. Which one are you about? The current world that we live in, the current reality, where lots of Black, brown, and indigenous kids are in schools where they're not learning how to read, they're not being taught how to read. They're in schools with a bunch of Gretas who could care less, who just want to push an agenda, who want to tell families, why would you leave MPS? What the hell are you talking about, Greta? What are you talking about? Like I said, we're going to make sure that we flood the Bethune neighborhood, that community where that school's at, flood it with flyers, flood it with solutions for families. Because Minneapolis Public Schools is not the solution for families, for children who are looking for, who are expecting, who deserve quality education. It's a must. Failure's not an option. You got the contact information. Hit us up. We ain't waiting though. There's no time to wait. We don't care what Greta says. We don't care what Denise Speck, the head of Education Minnesota, says. We don't care what Nick Faber says. They don't know ours. They don't know our people. So why would we care what they say? Well, we got to care what they say because they buy our elected officials from the Capitol to the school boards. It's time. Step up, stand up. If you didn't think that there's an attack or a war on families, well, you're seeing it right now. And it's not all families. It's low wealth families. It's redline communities. So what you're going to do? You're just going to tune in. You're going to share this with your friends, which I appreciate. But not even for me is talk enough. We talk all the time. It's about quality education. It's about action towards quality education. And there's going to be ample opportunity to tear this system down and rebuild it with the ideas of our children, the ideas of parents, along with teachers, along with principals, along with district leadership. But we cannot continue on this path of adequate and uniform. Remember me talking about that before? That's how our Constitution reads. An adequate and uniform system. Well, that adequate and uniform system is getting ready to destroy our children's brains. That's what we're sitting in. Uniform and adequate bullshit. Good night. Tune in next time. I appreciate y'all. It's time to stand all the way up, not back down, and make sure our children have quality education here in the state of Minnesota. And if it starts with leaving the district you're in, leaving the school you're in, and finding a more quality option, well, we got your backs. And I want to say one more thing, right? For the families who choose to stay in Minneapolis public schools, we have your backs too, right? The system broken is broken. I sound like my little 3-year-old nephew or niece saying, bro, the system broken, uncle. But the system's broken. We don't need to fix it. We need to tear it down, build it back up as a community. Because the experiences of our children inside of these low-performing schools, inside of districts that don't listen to families, the experiences of our children are intertwined. If you're Latine, probably even worse for you right now in Minneapolis public schools. They're not answering the phone when you call. You can't understand them when you come to the board meeting because they don't have interpreters for you. When you do get in touch with them at the school, they don't speak your language. So it's worse. It's worse for our neighbors who speak other languages. So if we don't do something now, like seriously, when you stop tuning in, if you don't do something right after that for our children, if it's calling someone, writing someone, shame on you if you do nothing. If you choose to go the path of the Gretas of the world, shame on you. If you choose to take a vacation while families are expecting something, expecting outcomes, expecting support, you choose to take that vacation like Ed Graff did. I'll tell you this, right? That vacation for Ed, it might get a little longer soon. I keep looking at all these messages. Well, why didn't y'all call for him to step down? I said at the press conference, hey, we need to listen to some more families. We need to listen to community members a little more, have a conversation. But I understand. He went on vacation. I mean, let's be honest. He probably didn't even go on vacation, right? You got $1 million home. He probably was sitting at home chilling. Netflix and chill. So it's like he went on vacation, and we might have to extend that vacation. But this ain't about Ed right now, y'all. It's about our children who are stuck in these school systems, school districts that aren't providing a quality education. That's what this is about. So what are you going to do after I click this button that says end broadcast? I hope that you text MNPU to 33339 and become a member. Join the fight. I hope that you tell one of your friends or family members to text MNPU to 33339 and join the fight. What I hope you don't do is just talk. What I hope you don't do is allow your nonprofit organization to sit back while our children are dying. You heard of the pipeline to prison, so you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say sit back while our children are dying. Might not happen in Greta Callahan's kindergarten classroom at Bethune, where they die. But think about it. Right? No education. You can't read, you're illiterate. Shit, tough luck. It's going to be tough. So what are you going to do? I'll be back Sunday, 10 a.m. Shit, I might keep it Tuesday, 7 p.m. But I'll let y'all know. Appreciate y'all tuning in. This is Dark Side of Education. I'm Rashad Turner, founder and executive director for Minnesota Parent Union. Remember, quality is a must. Failure is not an option. Zip code should not determine quality of education. God's peace and blessings to all of y'all. Have a good night. Peace.